Story. I'm now joined by Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House acting chief of staff, and Mallory Newall, vice president of public affairs with Ipsos US. Welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us. Mick Mulvaney, let me start with you. He was your boss. Are you surprised that he's found himself in this trouble?
No, Miriam, thanks for having me. After January 6th, nothing would surprise me about Donald Trump. He's changed dramatically over the last couple of years. As I explained to people, we began in 2017. He was advised by the former president of Goldman Sachs, the former CEO of Exxon, and now he's advised by a guy who sells pillows on a television network here. So no, Donald Trump it doesn't surprise me. He is where he is. He's always been a little bit lackadaisical with confidential documents, but more importantly, he's never been willing to admit that he was wrong. He's never been like that. Excuse me, he's always been like that. And he's simply refused to return documents that he should have returned. What we're seeing here is a classic example of the cover-up being worse than the crime. There's a couple of charges here related to the retention of the documents, but many of the charges here are related to the obstruction of justice and the cover-up that Donald Trump willingly engaged in, it seems, to just try and keep documents that have very little value, it seems, to himself instead of sending them back to the federal government.
Why did he keep the documents, Mick?
Ego, I think, is really the only thing that I can explain to that. He refuses to admit that he is wrong, ever. It's one of his basic philosophies of life. He told me many times, never admit that you were wrong. So he never wanted to admit that he should have these documents, never wanted to admit that he should have given them back. There's no allegations here that he derived any value from them. There's no allegations that he sold them to anybody. There's no allegations that he benefited really from having them. He apparently only showed them to people twice, according to the indictment, and those were staffers that worked for him. So it's completely unclear as to why he did it, other than that's Donald Trump. And that, by the way, is what's gotten him in a tremendous amount of hot water and staring at many, many possible years in prison.
Just before I bring in Mallory, what impact do you think, Mick, this will all have on his bid for a Republican nomination and his chances of re-election?
Very little. I think his chances of becoming the Republican nominee have probably gone up slightly. The chances of him winning a general election have gone down slightly, but he was always likely to be the Republican nominee and always likely to lose in a general election to Joe Biden, whoever the Democrats have. Donald Trump has not done a good job of fixing what was broken in 2020. He lost in 2020 for a variety of reasons, and he's not changed. Again, it's hard to change when you can't admit that you were wrong. He can't even admit that he lost. So I fully expect his campaign to go on. Again, in my country, you can run for office from jail, you can win office from jail, and you might even be able to serve from jail, although we've never crossed that bridge before. So, no, I don't expect this, believe it or not, Miriam, to impact the politics very much yet.
Mallory, you have fascinating insights because you're a pollster in Ipsos. I mean, tell us about the most recent polls. There was one yesterday, but there was one just before that as well about whether or not Republicans think these charges are serious and then whether or not they care.
Thanks for having me, Miriam. Yes, so Ipsos has released a couple of polls in the past few days, taken right in the wake of this newest indictment. And essentially, the public sees this latest indictment as serious. But, and I think Mick was alluding to this, has it dented Trump's support or his standing among his base? Not at all.
And interestingly, though, what do they do think they're serious charges, though, Mallory, don't they? So it's very strange.
That's right. 3 in 5 Americans believe that this latest indictment is serious. And compared to our polling in April, because there's been multiple indictments, so we've been able to track this over time, we've seen that Republicans are a little bit more likely to say it's serious compared to the first time around. But those views don't really translate into any consequences for the former president. The public is still very much split on whether or not he should be charged with a crime. The public is very much split on whether or not he should run for office. And what I think that shows is just the deep polarized divisions of our society. Essentially, we've got a third of the American public, Republicans, who are standing by the president. His base, his support has sort of solidified. We have a third, Democrats, who were strongly opposed to begin with. And then we have a third of independents in the middle who are kind of split on things, but are definitely growing more disillusioned with the former president.
But how do you explain Republicans? You know, it's meant to be the party of law and order. How does it explain that they don't care that this man they support is guilty of these very serious charges or is being charged with these very serious charges?
Well, the Republican Party is very much right now the party of Trump. We're seeing that borne out in our data. When you look at hypothetical Republican primary matchups, Trump still nets support from a plurality of self-identified Republicans, and that really hasn't moved much at all over time. So again, as Mick said, he's likely right now to be the nominee, but that doesn't really translate very well to a general election because there are not enough Republicans in this country. There's not enough support behind the former president for him to win a general election, which of course is a long way away. So we'll have to see what happens.
Absolutely. Mick, you know this man well. Would he be stressed walking into that courtroom this evening? Is it all bravado, the way he blames everyone else, says it's a fit-up? I mean, would he be stressed?
A little bit of both. There's a lot of bravado. There's a lot of blame. There's no question about it. He really does believe, and I don't mean that lightly. He believes with all of his being that he's being targeted and that he is innocent. He doesn't. It's not capable. He's not capable of admitting to himself that he might have committed a crime. That being said, he didn't like this today. He really didn't. He did like the media attention. He's been nonstop media coverage here, as you can imagine. It's almost like the old O.J. Simpson trial or the time that O.J. Simpson drove around in the white Bronco 30 years ago. He loves that. He loves the attention. But he did not like being taken into custody, did not like being arrested. He was not handcuffed today. He was not given a mugshot today, but he was put under arrest by the United States federal government. And even Donald Trump doesn't like that. So it's a little bit of both in answer to your question.
Mallory, what's your instinct? Do you think he has a chance of winning the next election based on your pollster instinct?
Well, my pollster instinct is telling me that polls are designed to be a snapshot in time. And what is sort of unfolding right now, I think what's going to happen next November remains to be seen. That being said, what I'm seeing in the data now is that Republicans are very much still with Trump. He has solidified support among his base, and that bodes well for him in a primary. No other Republican is even within striking distance right now. And yet, as I mentioned, the American public is still too divided and too segmented here. I don't see him picking up that much support from those in the middle who are growing more disillusioned to be successful in November 2024.
OK, listen, Mallory Newall, Mick Mulvaney, really appreciate you both taking the time. It's such a busy day in the States to talk to us in Ireland. Thanks a million. Well, now, our reporter, Conor McAmey,